You're listening to the Nabs Now podcast.
Welcome to the Nabs Now podcast. I'm Noah Carver.
And I'm Ecclesia Tashoma.
It might sound strange, given that we're releasing this episode in December, that I'm about to talk about October, but there is a method to the madness, so bear with me. October is a month which holds particular significance in the organized blind movement. For a start, October is Blind Equality Achievement Month, a month to remember the history of our movement, celebrate our accomplishments, and advance our continuous work towards full social recognition of the innate independence, capability, and equality of blind people. It is over this backdrop that we also celebrate White Cane Awareness Day on October 15th. This year's Blind Equality Achievement Month was a little bit different, though.
Hey, hey, ho, ho, ride the Niles have got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho.
There's no denying that since their formation, rideshare companies like Lyft and Uber have afforded blind people much greater and more equitable access to transportation at parity with sighted people. However, Uber and Lyft have also systematically failed to uphold their obligations under the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, to prevent discrimination against blind riders, particularly guide dog users, with the result being that rideshare drivers unlawfully deny blind riders in general and guide dog users in particular at shockingly high rates. These denials have caused circumstances for riders which have ranged from simply inconvenient to deeply unsafe and even life-threatening. When these incidents are reported, blind riders have noted that little or nothing is done by rideshare companies to discipline offending drivers. For years, the National Federation of the Blind has engaged in good faith dialogue with Lyft and Uber in hopes of ending this illegal treatment, with little to no success. So, hundreds of blind people took to the streets in San Francisco, California on White Cane Awareness Day to make our voices heard, protesting in front of Lyft and Uber's headquarters to demand that our rights be upheld. Today we're joined by two students who attended the rally and protested, and who will share their experiences. So, without further ado, let's get started, and I'd like both of you to introduce yourselves if you could. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, your name, the state you're from, where you attend school, what year, and how long you and your dog have been working together.
Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay Kerr, and I am currently a master's and credential student at San Francisco State pursuing my degree in special education with an emphasis in visual impairment. And I am in my last year of my program, hopefully looking to complete student teaching next semester. And in addition to that, I also work in Southern California at one of our sister campuses in accessibility. And I have been a guide dog handler now about 16 months.
Hello, everyone. My name is Colin Wong. I currently reside in Seattle, Washington. I go to school at the University of North Dakota. I'm working on my PhD in educational leadership with a concentration in adult and higher education. I am actually a former guide dog user, and I attended the protest, being an O&M instructor myself and also being a former guide dog user. I thought it was important to be there and, support the cause.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much, guys, for this amazing intro. The second question we have for the both of you is what are the reasons that you attended the rally?
When I was a guide dog user, I remember how discriminatory I felt when it was difficult to get an Uber or a Lyft. And, I feel empathetic to the people who are still guide dog handlers and who are still facing that discrimination today. I realize that it is a important issue, and I think it's important that blind people can confidently access Uber and Lyft without the fear of whether or not their next ride that they're getting is going to just drive off because they see that they have a guide dog. And it's the responsibility of Uber and Lyft to provide access. So, I just remember how I felt when I was a handler, and I want to make sure that other people in the future don't have to face that form of discrimination.
Absolutely. I think change is super important. Lindsay, what about you?
Yeah, I attended because it's something that I'm being impacted on a daily basis. And I know as I'm going into my student teaching semester, it's only going to get worse. Hopefully not, but just with our current situation and the way things are set up, I can see it getting worse, at least for me, because the type of teaching that I'm looking at doing is itinerant, meaning that I have to commute from student to student. And one of the only ways that I'm going to be able to get from student to student in my current city and county is by using Uber and Lyft. And if we are being faced by these similar issues moving forward, it's going to be really difficult to get to these type of sites to teach students.
Yes, both of you have shared such insightful responses. Creating change during this time is super important, especially not only for us, but for future generations. And that leads into our third question.
Both of you have experienced personally rideshare discriminations. Is there an experience in particular which stood out for either of you? And if so, would you be willing to share it with our audience?
I actually shared this in a personal Facebook post. So when I was at the 2023 National Convention in Houston, I was traveling with two guide dog handlers at the time. I wasn't a guide dog handler yet, but within days I would be. And we were gonna just casually go to the color factory and explore that particular space as we had heard it was a tourist spot in the area. And my companions had said, hey, can you book our ride for this trip just to see, what kind of reaction you're going to get as a cane user versus us as guide dog users? And I was like, sure. Come to find out, the driver had said to me, this ride you booked was only for one person, which, if you know anything about the Uber platform, that's not something that they offer. And so I was like, no, you have to take me and you have to take my companions. And this driver went on to just berate us as blind women and said things like, you're too pretty to be blind, classified my friend's dogs as guide cats, and just couldn't believe that we were independently trying to get somewhere. I later reported this incident to Uber as I didn't see it was appropriate for this driver to have such language towards us. And I also made John Perret aware as I ran into him in passing that evening.
Wow. Yeah, I don't really have words for that. That's unacceptable. And for those who don't know, John Perret is the Executive Director for Advocacy and Policy at the National Federation of the Blind. And Colin, how about you? Are there any experiences which you would like to share?
Yeah, definitely. I remember I was actually in San Diego and I was trying to go to a restaurant for brunch with my wife, and we ordered an Uber, and the ETA for the Uber was about 5 minutes, but we ended up waiting for about 15 minutes. And after that 15-minute mark, they ended up canceling. But I could tell, the app told me that, within that 5 minutes, they were actually there. So, for 10 minutes, it kept saying 1 minute away. And eventually they canceled. And they didn't provide any explanation. But my wife is sighted. So she says that she saw the car description from a distance, but it wouldn't come any closer. And eventually they just drove away. I didn't get any message from the driver. They didn't say anything. So to me, that indicated that they were driving away because they saw that I had a guide dog. So that was very hard to deal with and frustrating. I eventually ordered another Uber. I did file an Uber complaint, and they said that they would look into it. And that was the only response that I got. But they didn't provide any information about, what follow-up action ended up taking place. The ironic thing was the next Uber driver was one of the most friendliest in the world. And without even prompting her, she was like, I'm so excited. I never driven a guide dog user before. I just love animals. And it's such a shame that I hear how other Uber drivers aren't willing to transport guide dogs. So I went from having one of the worst experience to one of the best experience. But it goes to show to me that, even other Uber drivers knew how discriminatory other drivers were handling passengers with guide dogs.
Sure, sure. Thanks a lot, Colin. Appreciate it.
The next question that we have for the both of you is how do you interpret the responses of companies post-rally, in particular Uber's self-identification program, which President Riccobono has already addressed?
I think it's an attempt at Uber trying to, brush under the rug what they've already done, but I don't think it's a solution. If anything, it may help show them the issue that they have with drivers denying rides, but I don't think it should be on us to disclose our disabilities just to get a ride. I mean, this could, come down the line for cane users to have to potentially do the same thing, or even others within other disability spaces within the community at large.
I agree with Lindsay. I think that it should be our personal decision on whether we disclose that we have a disability. And I feel like if I have announced that I have a disability beforehand, it gives the driver such an earlier opportunity to cancel the ride. And I feel like it could open an opportunity for additional discrimination.
100%. I think disclosing your disability and sort of navigating that can be a tricky process, especially with the discrimination that the both of you and other guide dog handlers have been facing. So thank you so much.
So, next question, and we're going to get into questions specifically about the rally now. Can you give an overview of your experiences at the rally? What moments stand out for you, and what was your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, definitely. It was such an impactful and powerful rally. You can just feel all the energy in the air. I love the chants, and you can just hear, how passionate everybody was, and also how heartbreaking other people's stories were. Like a lot of times when I had gone through the guide dog discrimination with Uber and Lyft, you really felt alone and isolated. But when I was there, it really shows that this is really and truly such a pervasive issue. And you saw how many people that this issue really impacts. And I left the rally incredibly inspired, and it shows how much work Uber and Lyft really need to do to provide equitable access.
I would have to agree with Colin. It was definitely a powerful experience to hear others' stories as well as the different chants that everyone came up with. But I think as it relates to Uber, having someone from their office actually come out to us and take one of our signs, like I didn't think that was going to happen. We don't know what they did with it, but for them to just simply come out and see what was going on was huge. I wish that at Lyft they had done that, but that didn't happen. But maybe that'll help them grow later. Who knows?
Wait, so you're saying that somebody actually came out from Uber and came and grabbed a sign, and I mean, who knows? Like you said, who knows what they did with it? But at least they came and did that.
Yeah, they, from my understanding, and Colin can correct me if I'm wrong, they came up to President Riccobono and he handed them a sign and they went back inside with it.
Okay, nice.
So, advocacy is such a crucial part of creating change, especially within the blind movement and other social movements as well. Do you guys have any advice for students or people in general and how they can advocate for themselves?
Yeah, I would recommend that students do a lot of research on what their rights are. It's important to have a thorough understanding of uh, what you do qualify for and what you're legally obligated to get, whether that is understanding your IEP process when you are going through K-12, or whether or not it's understanding what informed choice means when you're going through the vocational rehabilitation process. And then same thing, understanding what you are entitled to when you are going to college. I think when you have the most information possible on what you are entitled to get, then you're going to walk into that advocacy situation with the most amount of confidence because you understand that what you are saying is the right.
100%. Lindsay, what about you?
I would have to agree with Colin. And then, the same thing goes for, when the employment piece comes in. But I think also it really starts with the student TBI and the others on the student's IEP team to equip them with those tools and use the proper channels of resources that these educators were taught in their own educational journeys in higher education.
Absolutely. Knowing your rights and being informed and having the confidence is such a huge factor in advocating for yourself, but also for other people. So thank you so much for sharing your tips and tricks.
Okay, final question for you. What message do you hope that rideshare companies such as Uber and Lyft will take from the organized blind movement's rideshare rally?
I think it's plain and simple. We have the right to ride just as much as everybody else. We're just trying to get to work. We're trying to get to doctor's appointments. We're trying to get to the grocery store to do the simple thing of eating. We use the service just as everyone else does, and possibly more often because we don't have the option to drive.
Yeah, I think Lindsay put it perfectly. I think it's important that we're not asking for anything unreasonable. It's important that blind customers should have access to the same public accommodations as anybody else, and Uber and Lyft falls under that category. So I agree with Lindsay 100%.
Thank you so much. All right, final question of the night. Do either of you have anything that you would like to add to the podcast or anything that you would like to pass on to our listeners before we close down shop tonight?
I would just encourage everyone to join NABS or, become involved with the National Federation of the Blind. There's so many divisions, groups, committees that people can participate in and, make the National Federation of the Blind and NABS a part of your educational journey.
I would agree, as this really does help students find their place, but also NABS and other portions of the National Federation of the Blind could be their piece to learn how to advocate for themselves in whatever field they may be going into, whether it be education, law, technology, public policy, whatever the case may be.
Hey, we appreciate the promo, guys.
We really do.
In all seriousness, thank you so much. And we really appreciate you guys spending time with us today and sharing your experiences at the rally and highlighting its importance. So thank you guys so much for joining us here on the NABS Now podcast. It's really been a pleasure to talk to you both.
You are so welcome.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks to you for listening to the NABS Now podcast. By the way, Lindsay publishes a blog detailing her experiences as a new guide dog handler, which you can find on the net at adventureswitheve.com. And that link is also in the show notes. Two other things before we close up shop. Firstly, the NABS Now podcast is moving to a bi-monthly release schedule. Don't worry, the podcast isn't going anywhere. We'll just be releasing shows every 2 months now. So stay tuned for our next episode, which will be released on February 1st next year. Finally, an important message for blind students living in the 50 states, Puerto Rico, and the District of Columbia. Applications for the 2025 National Federation of the Blind Scholarship will open on December 1st, 2024, and will close on March 31st, 2025. Each year, the National Federation of the Blind awards 30 scholarships to students displaying academic excellence, community service, and leadership. Speaking personally, receiving the 2023 NFB scholarship and being introduced to the Federation has changed my life, and I don't say that lightly. For more information about the scholarship program, requirements, and to apply, visit nfb.org/scholarships. The link to that will also be in the show notes.
This podcast was brought to you by the National Association of Blind Students, a proud division of the National Federation of the Blind.
This show was hosted by Noah Carver and Ecclesia Teshoma. It was produced by Noah Carver, Nadia Graham, Celine Monjaras, and Ecclesia Teshoma. Our editor for this episode is James Yessel, and our NABS board rep is Manahal Joffrey. Special thanks to Marcy Carpenter and Jean Kim for their support in making this episode possible. Find links to our website and social media, and join our email list and WhatsApp community, all from our new link tree, which can be found on the web at linktr.ee/nabslink. The link to that will be in our show notes. Thanks for listening to the NABS Now podcast. Be sure to subscribe and share with your friends.